I am the youngest of four natural brothers and sisters, the youngest of 8 step-siblings. My parents were divorced when I was fairly young. My dad was a highway patrolman. My mom was a nurse. We grew up in a household that had great relationship between our parents, even though they were divorced. I spent summers with my dad and had a great relationship with both sides. They always impressed upon us the importance of helping and serving others. But we also knew we had to work, and I started shoveling snow and mowing lawns before I was 10. I actually had some accounts, apartments that I took care of, the sidewalks, and frankly, that's how you earn money. People are always amazed that I'm pretty handy, that I can fix most things and small engines, and I learned having to do that, having to fix lawnmowers and having to fix other things, shown by my older brothers or whatever we had to do. But that's just what we did. Got my first paycheck job at 12, working for Culligan Water Conditioning, cleaning their bathrooms and sweeping up after them. And it was a great experience because I got to see guys who actually got paid more based on how much they sold, commission workers. And I always thought, look, if these guys put more time in, they'll make more money. What a great concept. Then went to work at American's Golden Arches, where you learn if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Ended up managing that and helped a couple open a pizza place. And literally every week watched them count the till at the end of the Friday night to see whether they're going to have enough money to stay open. They literally mortgaged their house to open the restaurant, and learned that entrepreneurism can be risky, but it can also be great rewards. All of those things are some of the things that shaped me. But look, Mom worked overtime so us kids would have nice birthday and Christmas presents. And people who worked hard, and that was the message. Do the right thing, work hard, and America will take care of you. First one in my family to go to college. I don't know why it was just always, Keith's going to go to college. And I don't know if it's because I was the youngest, because I did well in school or what it was, but I was fortunate enough to get scholarships because it's the only way we were going to be able to pay for college. And so I worked my way through undergrad and then had the opportunity to go to law school, got scholarships to law school at Ohio State. Worked my way through law school, bartending, waiting tables, working in the city attorney's offices, did whatever you had to do to get by. And I say this all the time as I look back. Ohio, the good Lord, and hard work have blessed me. My wife and I now have 2 kids, 10 and 12, 5th grade and 7th grade, just started back to school. They're excited about it. But my wife and I always try and make sure our kids understand the value of hard work too. She is the chair of the math department at Road State, and we met working at the same company. After we got married, she decided to do a career change and go from being an actuary to being a college professor. And so she went back to grad school while we were just married, and I've always respected her work ethic and tenacity. She makes me better in all things. I always tell people I outkicked my coverage. I married far better than she did, and anybody who knows my wife will agree with that. It changed my whole perspective of the world. I was actually in politics before I actually was blessed to have kids. My wife and I had to struggle to have a family. We worked real hard at it. The good Lord finally decided to bless us, and we had some challenges and early issues with children, and it made me a better person. It made me a stronger person, but it also told me that there's a power. I had a faith, but you never have a faith until you go through some personal crisis, and that helped shape me, and I know it helped shape my wife. But it changed my whole perspective. I got into politics because I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. I saw things that we could do better. I stayed in politics because I want to make sure my kids and grandkids have the same opportunities to meet their God-given potential that my parents and grandparents gave us. And it just changed the whole perspective. And I talk to people who haven't had kids yet, and then I see them right after they have their first child, and I said, okay, isn't this cool? It changes everything. And parents get that. They understand that distinction. And it's why I think that generally my Republican colleagues, and my Democrat colleagues too, I just don't see that as often, in the legislature generally get it. We're not here for us. We're not here for the fancy titles, and we're not here for the really cool things that you come from being a legislator. we're here to try and make Ohio a better place. We just disagree with the Democrats how to get there, but we think our job is to make Ohio work. My first office I ran for was state rep. Jim Beakey, who was my mentor, was retiring for the first time. And people in the community had come to talk to me and said, hey, you ought to think about this. You're active in the party. You're very active in the community. So I went to my boss, who at the time was a former Indiana state rep. He was CEO of a company. And I said, people are talking about this crazy idea that I should think about running for office. And I'm expecting him to bat it down and say, you've got a good job here. We need you. And he says, no, I think that's a great idea. You ought to do it. And I'm going, well, you don't want me to be here very long? And he said, no, exactly the opposite. We think it's important that people invest in our communities, and elected service is certainly an investment in the community. The company believes in that philosophy. And so I ran for office. Originally, it started out, we had a pretty good team and a good lead, and then a very impressive county commissioner came out and ran against us. With hard work, I always hear Josh hold up his shoes, talking about burning out his shoes, and talking about how he knocked on 19,000 some doors. I said, Josh, that's a good start. We knocked on over 20,000 doors in our first state rep race, and did it nonstop for about a year, knocking on doors, and it paid off. We won by 7 points against a well-respected county commissioner from the largest county in the district. And it was a great way to run. We met a lot of people, had a great team, and never looked back on that with anything other than a favorable memory. And some of the people who helped us, I always wondered, why would you help a young guy from the county north of you? And I always still wonder that. Some of those people that were early in your shaping the career, whether it's people who were politically active or just people active in the communities, really made a difference in our races. And so I've never forgotten that, and have always appreciated people who, look, give your time, your talent, or your treasure to help somebody run. He did not. He did not formally endorse in the race. The best advice he gave me, he was one of the guys that encouraged me to run. But he said, Keith, I'm going to stay neutral, but the person who works the hardest in this race is the person who's likely to win. And Jim did me another favor. He kept everybody from outside of the area out of the race. That was the time between Bill Harris and the Larry Householder fight for Speaker, and frankly, neither one of them really engaged. In the end, we worked harder than anybody else, and it paid off. He would candidly give me advice. Represent the district, and there were times when I was not as attuned as I should be to the political nuances of somebody working for a governor giving advice that may not be consistent with what that governor wants you to do. And I at one time in particular, still owe Jim an apology for this. I've apologized, but I still owe him more. Made comments to somebody about, even Jim Beakey understands the dangers of voting for this tax increase in my district. And that got back to the governor's people, and Jim was taken to the woodshed for it. I should have never let that out. In retrospect, it didn't change Jim one bit. He came back and said, Keith, keep doing what you're doing. We started, when I became Senate President, when I met with every one of the members, and then we worked in small groups, we made a pledge that we would run the caucus as a small D Democratic caucus, meaning we would be inclusive. We would make decisions as a collective. One of the things we did, for example, is we would caucus on bills before they would come out of committee. And it ran some of the people who were used to the tradition way crazy, because they would say, well, Keith, we just put it on the floor. We have the votes in the committee, but you don't have the votes in the caucus. If you don't have the votes in the caucus, our rule was we're not bringing the bill out of committee. And people's heads would explode. That's the way we ran the caucus, and that's the way we ran things. Now, there were occasions to where, as president, you have to put your thumb on the scales, sometimes to stop people from making mistakes that are going to hurt them or hurt the caucus as a whole. But that's pretty rare, and that led to 4 times I did something that virtually no Senate president in most people's memory had done. I voted against a bill that I put on the floor. And the reason we did that was, look, I didn't give up the obligation to represent my district when I became Senate president. I didn't give the obligation to essentially go with the majority against my own personal views. And I told them, if you guys want to do something and you have the majority of this caucus, we'll put it on the floor, even if I'm against it. On 4 separate occasions, they did things that I voted no on. And people were shocked the first time that happened. I remember the Gongwer stories. Look, it was an independent caucus. I was an independent president. I tried to lead to be inclusive, and we operated as a group. Now, it isn't a great big secret that the Senate as a whole was not as conservative as my district. And for that reason, I tried to be a leader for all Ohio. And candidly, if we didn't have the votes for something, we didn't have the votes for something. And I can give plenty of examples of where that came up. But I didn't have the ability. I wasn't a dictator. I couldn't say, you're going to vote for this. I would talk, I would handhold, I would coerce in ways that were supportive, not ways that were threatening. And in the end, if we didn't have the votes for it, we couldn't get it done. And it led to some interesting things. But for the most part, I'm pretty impressed by the level and the nature of the senators I served with. Frankly, I'm impressed by the level of the legislators I served with on both parties. And their ability to separate sometimes personal interest and do what's in the best interest of Ohio. And we did some pretty conservative things. I'm pretty proud of our record. Things like cutting $5 billion in taxes. Things like implementing the Common Sense Initiative that frankly I drafted and we got implemented through. That's cut almost 50% of the new regulations in the state. Things like the Ohio Senate 5% challenge. We had real big proponents of higher ed that would come in and say, Keith, you're asking higher ed to reduce the cost of a degree by 5%. They're going to go out of business. I'm going, really? The average was not 5% when it was all implemented. It was 11.7%. And we cut 11.7% out of the average cost of a degree in Ohio, and the world didn't come to an end. And so, we had members of our caucus who were very close to higher education institutions, and we just had to work past it. It was the right thing to do. We did a lot of other things that are conservative that everybody said that the Senate would never get done. Now, were there some things that I wish we would have done? Yes. In the end, I'm pretty happy with our record. Look, I think it's a very good job that ties in with what I've done as a legislator. As a legislator, I've been at the pinnacle, and I've been a backbench freshman legislator twice. I think it's a good way for me to use my skills to make Ohio better, to try and advance the game, to make Ohio more efficient, more effective, more transparent. I think we can do more. I think the State Auditor's Office is a great place to do the things that I believe government ought to be doing. It is the one state agency that has the ability to impact and promote the rest of state government to work better. And for that reason, I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's an opportunity that we can get out there and use the tools to make government work better. Look, the Auditor's Office is a little different than the Senate legislature. And this is something I have, it's a tough transition to convince people of. First, the auditor is the state's essentially compliance officer. You're the one to make sure that obviously nobody's lying, stealing, and cheating, but you're also there to make sure people who aren't doing something correctly, if it's a training issue, you help support them and get them the training issue. If it's an issue to where they know what to do and they're not doing it, you get them to do the correct thing, either by persuasion or by coercion. In the end, that's the job of the State Auditor's Office. And my wife always points this out. The State Auditor's Office is not like your local auditor's office. The State Auditor's Office doesn't collect any taxes, doesn't assess any private individuals. The State Auditor's Office basically audits government and makes sure government works right. It isn't dealing with individuals and whether you owe taxes or whether you don't. It only deals with governments. Now, if you do business with governments, it will audit that relationship. But that's the State Auditor's Office. And so that's much different than being a policymaker in the state legislature. If you look at my legislative career, most of my legislative career has been focused on trying to get state government to work better, more efficiently, more effective, and more transparent. That's the State Auditor's Office. The big thing in the State Auditor's Office that really gets me excited, but look, we want to catch bad guys who are lying, stealing, and cheating. We want to train people to do better if it's an act of omission because they don't know better. But the performance audit side, that's the stuff that government really needs to do. Look, we need to put more efficiency and effectiveness in state government. We need to get state government to operate in a way that gets the job done more efficiently, more effectively. And that's it's a wealth of opportunity. We're going to be we're going to be in fertile and active hunting ground when it comes to finding better ways for government to do their job. You can look at the private sector. It innovates every single day. State government innovates, just not every single day. And certainly there are places where we innovate better than others. But if you look at my career and what I've focused on, it has been trying to get that performance enhancement out of government. I want more bang for the bucks that we have to spend, because ultimately it means one of two things. If we can spend the money we have better, it means either we need less of your money, which means we need less taxes, and I'm all for it, or government can reprioritize and get a better return on the money that it does have. Look, if we want more money for opiates, look, maybe if we spent money we do have better, we wouldn't need as much money to do the other things, and we could spend more on opiates. The other problem we've got, particularly with Medicaid expansion, is we've got a government that's rapidly consuming much more and growing at a faster pace than the taxpayers' revenues. And so that's going to create a problem that you either have to raise taxes or cut services. A third solution is to get better bang for the dollars we do spend. And that's why the performance audit side is really exciting. It's why I've started to have conversations with people who do this at a level beyond what we've traditionally been doing, and working with the private sector to ask them about working ways to implement performance-based measurement to try and get better results. Transparency is such an important issue in state government, and I think a good way to tie in the efficiency, the effectiveness, and transparency is a problem that we identified. People were having a tough time getting access to their public records, and it's something that certainly it's something the auditor's office has an input in, but the Attorney General's office had an input in it, the legislature did, and we were just having local governments in particular that were just not giving up public records. And the solution used to be you file a lawsuit, you spend a lot of money, and then attorney's fees get awarded, and it gets crazy. Well, then we saw the Attorney General's office start to put their program together, and the auditor's office started putting his program together. And we observed this in the legislature, and I said, look, the courts are the places for disputes between governments to be resolved. But we can get a resolution in the courts a lot faster. And as a mediator, I mean, I've been a mediator for 22 years now, it's taught me one thing, that if you set people with good intentions in a room together, and they want to find a solution, they'll find a solution a lot faster and a lot more efficiently and a lot more effectively than making them go through the battle that's litigation. And so what we did was we drafted the public record mediation bill to the acclaim of everybody who's used it. Actually, it's being used now as a national model. And for 25 bucks, you can get a public records dispute filed, get it resolved through mediation, and get your records. And so you're not spending thousands, in some cases tens of thousands of dollars, arguing over things. State governments too, one of the factors are going to be whether or not you're complying with the public records laws. Are you doing what you need to do on the public records side to get the information out? Have you had a series of public records disputes on things that are already pre-established? That's part of a training issue and part of a compliance issue. If they're needing extra training, we want to make sure they have access to that. But if they're just being obstinate, then we need to deal with that in another way. And so it's one of the findings that you can find in the management report, and we're going to seriously take a look at that as well.